our community. I'm Mary Davidson, and we're back to introduce you to some of our neighbors. Most interesting people. This morning, Dr. Arthur Hall is with us. He's the Executive Director of the Center for Applied Economics, School of Business, University of Kansas. And he, I have to say, you know, I read this and that, and Harry Truman always said he was looking for a one-armed economist because economists always said, well, on the one hand and on the other hand. True. So he was always looking for a one-armed economist. True. Anyway, Dr. Hall is the founding executive director for business of the Center for Applied Economics, but he has done many, many things. He was in Washington, and he worked for the U.S. General Accounting Office. Correct. And he has been the chief economist in the public affairs group of the Wichita-based Koch Industries, and he helped Governor Sebelius on her budget efficiency savings team. Indeed. So he's kind of been all over. And I think that the Center for Applied Economics, it focuses on the contributions that markets and economic institutions can make in economic development of the state, the local, the country. That's right. And sometimes the world. Yes. Because I know you've written articles about world economics. I have to start out. I cut out a little article. It's very small, but the message is kind of strong, and I'd like to talk about it. Okay. The state of Kansas is facing a projected $344 million shortfall in its current budget, with an additional deficit of nearly $600 million in the next fiscal year. That's 2015 and part of 2016, is that correct? That's correct. Okay. The problems arose after lawmakers cut income taxes at Governor Brownback's urging in 2012 and 2013. Yes. Heavy conversation on that subject. Yes, there's some history here I think everyone should understand. The first is when we were analyzing Governor Brownback's proposed tax cuts, there was no mystery that these budget gaps were going to occur about when they're about to occur. Everyone knows that the budgets fluctuate because income tax revenues, the economy, it's very economy based. And sometimes fluctuates. That's correct. A lot. Right. Yeah. So there's nothing certain. So when we hear about this, I think the frustration for me is this is not a surprise, but no preparations have been taken in the last several years to remedy it. Now, I think it's important, this history has been lost. Governor Brownback originally proposed a so-called revenue neutral tax package, and the legislature did not like removing all of the deductions. This was in the past year? This was in the past, right, leading up to the tax cuts that are in question now. Right. And all of those took effect, by the way, the 2013 tax year. There was a couple of tax changes in 2012, but most of what we're talking about became effective in the year 2013. So Governor proposed a revenue neutral package. The legislature said, no, we don't want that. We want something more extreme, which was their prerogative, and Governor Brownback went along, but then the legislature, and I believe it's fair to say the governor, have not taken preparations for reducing the spending in line with what they wanted the tax cuts to look like. So that's where we are. So now we're playing catch up. Can we catch up? Yes, I believe it's possible to catch up, although the $600 million is a big chunk of money. No kidding. I would be a little bit concerned. Yes, I mean, but are you willing, this to me is another frustration. Elected officials are very ready to cut taxes, but they're not ready to cut spending. And you know why, because there's so many constituencies related to every little line item in any budget, and they're willing to go to the mat for it. And in fact, that was part of the reason with the tax exemptions, or not removing the tax exemptions. There was a lot of constituencies fighting over each little one. So if you cannot get the government, the legislature, and the executive office to say, look, we are not going to play favorites, we're trying to do something significant, then you're going to end up in these problems. It's a Gordian knot. It is, except for, I mean, if there's a plan and you have sold that plan or proposed that plan to the electorate, and the electorate has said this is acceptable, and by the way, Governor Brownback was reelected, most of the folks in the legislature reelected. So you have to interpret that as the Kansas electorate likes the idea. A lot of the Kansas, a lot hate it.
Yeah.
But
nobody seems to be in the middle, actually.
Right. But what I find frustrating is the lack of an offense.
Yeah, yeah.
I just don't see one from where I sit.
Constantly playing defense, it really wears you out.
That's correct. And it's very ad hoc defense, I might add.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, somebody might say to you, well, if they're fighting over the money, we'll just reduce everything across the board 20%. Will that work? Or whatever percent?
Well, it could work in the sense that you would save the money, but it really is not what anybody wants. These across the boards cut politically can work sometimes because everyone is willing. This solves the special interest problem, right? Yeah. But everyone knows that's precisely what you don't want to do. What you should do is prioritize and get rid of things that are not appropriate and not working and are a waste of money, and there are lots of those things. Of course, let me quickly add, one person's crucial program is another person's waste, or vice versa, however you prefer to say it. But in my opinion, there is a significant amount of waste in the government. If you could get rid of that, or were willing to get rid of that, you could make great strides towards closing these budget gaps.
Well, that's, I call it crochet work. But we also don't want to become like the Smithsonian Institution. We don't want to collect everything, not reevaluate, and let go of what isn't working or what isn't germane to the today any longer.
And to do those types of things, and I believe we are due for a major house cleaning, personal opinion, but that requires sustained leadership and an offense. And I'm not seeing either one.
Well, here was another little piece I cut out of the paper. It says the Institute, and we're talking about taxes here, you realize. The Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy recently examined state and local tax policy and found Kansas is the 9th most unfair tax system in the nation. A Kansan earning $47,700 a year, smack dab in the middle of all earners, pays 9.5% in his or her income in state and local taxes. A Kansan earning $1,191,700, I wish I were there, on the other hand, pays an effective state and local tax rate of just 3.6%.
It's curious. I wonder who are worse, but I also wonder how they rank the best in their terms of fairness. Fairness is a subjective issue, as you know.
You have to call Dave Helling and ask him.
Correct. So let me, two comments. These are general academic comments. A lot of people believe in the idea of progressive taxation, meaning the more you make, the higher percentage you should pay. I don't agree with that idea.
Well, the president believes that.
Yes. I don't agree with that idea of fairness. I agree with proportional taxation. Someone who makes a lot more money will pay the same percentage, but pay a lot higher revenue. That, to me, is a fair system, and that's a system worth working for. But the statistics you just read need to be taken in context. And this really speaks to what's going on with the income tax. The legislature and the governor made a decision in 2012, effective 2013, that the goal for Kansas was to completely eliminate the income tax. We'd be the only state other than Alaska, I believe that's a correct statement, to have ever done it. The plan was, how do we get there? You can't do it all at once, so you have to phase it out. So the plan was, and this was partly an economic development strategy, was you would take all small business, we could qualify that term, and go immediately to a zero rate of taxation. The rate's not actually zero.
But it's close, is it not?
Well, it is effectively zero. But what happens is if you have this type of income and report it on your federal tax return, you get to deduct it from your Kansas income.
As a small business.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what these statistics are reflecting, is that temporary stage where we are now. If we follow through, or if the state of Kansas follows through, and I urge it to do that, if it's going to eliminate the income tax, then we need to get busy doing it so that these statistics do not remain. That all of a sudden we'll go to a much more proportional tax system without the income tax. If we are not going to eliminate the income tax, and that has been something that the electorate and the legislature and the governor decided, then we should take a new look at what we've done and say, look, no, that was a bad idea. We're not going to get rid of the income tax. we need to fix it now. Or, yes, we are still going to get rid of the income tax, and we need to get busy reducing the income taxes on all these other people.
It seems to me that, extrapolating a little bit from what you're saying, there are two things that are afoot here. One is continuity of thinking
Correct.
as we go along. The other is offensive planning.
Offensive planning, yes. That to me is the element that I don't see. And I should add, I'm not an inside player here. I like everyone probably in this audience, I read the headlines and I occasionally testify and I get called to answer questions sometimes, but I don't have any inside knowledge, and I'm not seeing any offensive planning or continuity of thinking for that matter.
Well, you know, a number of states have no personal property tax, and we're working in that direction.
Income tax, property tax.
No personal property tax.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so how do you raise money? I mean, you know, we've got income licenses, property sales.
Well, in Kansas, prior to this, we have three main. You have the income tax, you have the whole property tax system, which is primarily a local tax system,
right.
And then you have the sales tax. I've done some research work to show that if Kansas wanted to do it, you could get the revenue required from just the sales tax. Now you'd have to rework it a little bit. You'd have to get rid of some exemptions, broaden the base, maybe have a somewhat higher rate than we have now, but not much. And you could get the revenue. But you cannot make that work if you're not willing to control spending. So to me, this whole fiscal discussion is, are we willing to reduce spending in line with what our tax wishes are, or are we not? And we need offense, and we need continuity of thinking on that point.
Yeah. If I am correct, I believe that you want to keep the tax rate at 8%. Is that correct?
You mean the sales tax rate?
Yeah.
I'm indifferent to the rate. What from an economist perspective, trying to help lawmakers think through these issues, you always want a broad base and as low a rate as possible. The broader the base, the lower you can have the rate. The more you start saying, well, we're going to tax this but not that, then the rate has to go up. So 8% could potentially work, but again, that's not a magic number. Based on the research that I did, it could be between 8 and 9%. Well, yeah. And it's important to say, at least at the time I was doing this research, 8 and 9% would still keep us competitive with the Missouri side of the border, so you wouldn't get a lot of cross-shopping, and it could potentially raise enough money to eliminate the income tax.
Well, would you then tax all end-use consumption?
Well, that is where the rate part comes in. But the idea of the tax would be to tax all end-use consumption, except for housing. I mean, you could do it, and I've written a paper to show you how it might work, but it's pretty radical. I don't think folks would go for it, but if you did go for it, there's a way to do it, and it would lower the tax rate.
I just, you know, I think, oh my goodness, I don't know. It's, now, right now, there is effectively no tax on business-to-business transactions.
Yes, and that's actually smart. And the reason why is, if you are taxing, sales tax is important that people understand we're talking about the sales tax. If you start taxing business-to-business transactions, the sales tax starts getting passed along. And you get something called tax pyramiding or tax cascading, where you're actually paying tax on tax. So by the time it gets to the end consumer, if there's lots of stages in between, you have this rolling tax, and it ends up being an inefficient tax system.
It's like piling up the snow that
That's exactly right. That's a great analogy.
And no savings, you don't want to do tax on savings and investments.
Yes, and that in fact is part of the strength of certain types of tax reforms, is you want to not tax people who are investing in the economy. But when they're consuming out of the economy, then you can make a better rationale for paying a tax. It's sort of like, you know, you talk about economic pies. If you're going to help make pies, you don't pay. If you're going to eat pie, you got to pay.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was listening to some of your talks on YouTube, and I think it was in one of those that you did not support this, I don't know what you call it, robbing businesses from one side of the state line to the other, and we really seem to be spending an awful lot of time trying to do that.
This is an important issue, I think, and it gets to what is our economic policy in the state. And my perspective, and this is my own opinion, and I should have said from the beginning, by the way, for the audience, that all of these are my own opinions. I don't speak for KU on any of these issues.
So we needed to put a disclaimer.
Yes, yes, indeed. That the reason we're trying to get good tax policy is so all businesses are treated equally. I'm very much against special deals, special favoritism, where a certain business can go get a special deal from the government. I think we should have fair policies that are treated equally. All businesses are treated equally. And by the way, if we got rid of these special deals, that would be a significant chunk of money in the $50 to $100 million range per year.
Talk about a special deal. What is a special deal?
Well, we have several of them. One would be, let's talk about a very prominent one in the Kansas law. It's called the PEAK, P-E-A-K. It's Promoting Employment Across Kansas, is what it stands for. And the people who have backed this are very thoughtful people. But what happens is if a particular business is going to move into the state, then for a certain amount of time, the state will rebate them all of the withholding, personal employee income tax withholding that they would have withheld, and they'll rebate that to them. But you have to get a special deal in order to get that, right? So there has to be permission. Or there's certain types of tax incentives or tax credit. It's an investment tax credit. And it's a very generous tax credit. And if it were available to everyone, I'd be in favor of it. But again, it's a special deal where if you petition the Department of Commerce and they agree that this is worthy of getting the deal, then they will give you this 10% investment tax credit. But only about 100 to 150 businesses a year get it. But we have thousands of businesses
that apply, I'm sure.
Well, they don't apply. A lot of them just don't apply because it's too cumbersome. So you end up with sort of special deals for bigger businesses, and you have lots and lots of smaller entrepreneurs who are trying to make it.
Well, but there are a lot of perks out there, like Star Bonds.
Yes, that's true.
That's another one.
Yes.
So there are a lot of perks out there. Those cost money.
Right. And there are thoughtful people who advocate for these things, but my opinion is we should get rid of all of them and have a steady, low tax rate or no income tax. Let's just get rid of the income tax.
See, what I hear you talking about is some continuity and consistency of thought.
That's correct.
Across the board.
Policies. Policies that everyone knows what the rules are. There's no special deals. There's no, special favors. You don't have to go ask permission. You know that if you do it, you get it. But
good policy drives the gears on the machine, whatever machine you're talking about.
That's
really it does.
I agree with you. Yeah. Good policy, and then it's available for everybody.
Talk about a fair tax versus a flat tax.
The fair tax is essentially a sales tax, just like a retail sales tax that everyone's familiar with.
Everybody pays.
That's right. A flat tax is like an income tax. It's a little technical, but when folks talk about what's called the flat tax, they think of the single tax rate, but that's really the least interesting part of the tax system. What makes the flat tax sort of an economically good policy, if it were applied correctly, is that it doesn't tax saving and investment. You do have a single rate, and that's an important feature for various reasons, but most folks focus on the single rate and say, that's what a flat tax. Really, the flat tax program that people probably have heard about is a tax system that doesn't tax saving and investment, and that's what makes it potent. So the fair tax is a sales tax type administrative system, and the flat tax is an income tax type administrative system, but both of them have the same basic economic policy goal of not taxing saving and investment.
Well, I think that's kind of interesting. I know that expensing is a favorite subject of yours.
Well,
but I have no idea.
Okay, well, it's pretty easy to explain. It is a technical subject. All the accountants who are listening
But see,
will
in order for us to decide what we think as citizens, tax-paying citizens, we have to be a little more savvy about what we're talking about.
I agree with you, yeah. So the idea of expensing is a way to not tax investment, but to have it fair for all businesses. And in fact, Kansas has passed expensing into law. It's now available to any corporation that wants to take it. It used to be available to any small business that want to take it, but once you eliminate their income tax, there's no reason to have expensing anymore. So what you do is when you make an investment in, say, a machine for your business or a computer or office equipment, then you'd get to write that off, deduct the whole purchase price right away from your taxes. Usually what you have to do is say, okay, I'm going to depreciate these according to the rules, meaning I'm going to write them off slowly over time. Okay, so you get smaller deductions over a longer time period. But that's not as good for investment as doing it all at once. And so the expensing feature in Kansas law was meant to make Kansas a more friendly place to invest, and for it to be a policy that was available to all businesses, and it has this added attribute of that it treats every single investment equally, proportionally.
Well, and the whole idea is to get people to invest,
That's
period.
right.
Whether it's in a business or a piece of property or a home
That's
or
right.
whatever it is.
So let's talk about that for a minute, because the question I get asked all the time by lawmakers in particular is, how do we make Kansas more economically vibrant, or how do we get the Kansas economy to grow more? And there's really only two ways. You have to get people to move here, and you have to get people to invest here. And of course, it's an open country. We're in competition not only with other states, but other countries. And we have all of these things we want to do with regard to schooling and all that, so we have to raise money. So the question is, how do you set up policies that make Kansas a very attractive place for people to want to move to and invest in? And there's a whole debate in the economics literature about what comes first, people or jobs. And I don't think we've resolved that yet. So it's one of these things. Let me give you an analogy. There's a famous business book called Good to Great by a guy named Jim Collins.
I've read that book.
Okay, and so he talks about how does an average business start to become great. And the imagery he uses, and this is the imagery I would like to use for this discussion, is he talks about a big flywheel. And there's no magic moment. It's just you slowly but surely start turning that flywheel, and it goes faster and faster and faster. And that's the image I have in my head when I'm trying to answer this question, is how do you begin the flywheel spinning so that slowly but surely Kansas starts to pick up steam. And once you start picking up steam, people do want to come here because this is where the action is. And if people are coming here because this is where the action is, then businesses want to invest here. And this is the trick. How do you get the flywheel moving?
You get the right people with you on the bus.
That's right, exactly. You get the right people with you on the bus, and that becomes a tricky, but that's the challenge, right? How do you get the people onto Kansas soil, and how do you get people who want to invest onto Kansas soil?
You know, I think a large issue also, and I know it is with you, and it underlies some of the concepts that we're talking, is water.
Yes, yes.
And you believe in a water bank.
Yes, so there's context here too, so everyone is up to speed. I think well, not everyone knows this, but recently Governor Brownback put out a 50-year water vision. And it was a sorely needed plan, and a lot of thoughtful work has gone into it. I was invited in through the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors. Initially, I was asked to think about water demand. Where is the water demand going to be? But what was fascinating to me as I started hearing the public debates is people started talking about the value of water. If everyone had a better understanding of the value of water, we'd make better decisions about how to invest in water and how to use water. Well, as an economist, I said, you cannot know the value of water until people are able to buy and sell water. In other words, you can have these wonderful, warm, fuzzy discussions about how it's vital for life.
We're talking about supply and demand here.
That's exactly
Yes,
right. And
yes.
so you won't know the value of water until you can trade water. That was my argument. So what I learned is that Kansas has a water bank, and other states like California, Colorado that have water issues, they allow for the trading of water. Well, I learned in the process that Kansas actually has a law that allows trading of water. This is out around Great Bend.
Yeah.
But what argument I made is that in Wichita, you could make the aquifer that helps supply Wichita's water into a water bank. And you could allow for the trading of water around Wichita. And I think it's a good idea, and I've talked to people in Wichita about it. They think it's a good idea, but it's one of these things that has to pick up speed.
Well, it has to kind of soak in.
That's right, good.
I know that you also have made the comment that dynamism is the next phase in Kansas economic development policy.
Right.
Explain yourself, Dr. Hall.
The idea of dynamism, in fact, my report is called Embracing Dynamism. So The general policy prescription that I'm put forward is no more special deals. Everyone gets the same deal. But here's why. I'll give you a fact that I think will startle you. Over the last 20 years, 4.8% of all brand new businesses created almost 50% of all new jobs in Kansas. 4.8% of businesses, 50% of jobs. These are the small businesses that grow really fast. But you can't just say, hey, I want to be a small business and grow really fast. It's a numbers game. You have to have as many people as possible trying to become the next Google. And if you're lucky, or the next Garmin, the next Cerner, let's put it in local terms. And if you're lucky, you'll get them, right? But it's a numbers game. And this gets back to having no income tax on small business. We want as many people to get in the game as possible. And then with the numbers up, we might get our next Garmin, our next Cerner.
Well, and it also means attracting brainy people to Kansas,
Yes.
and keeping the brainy people that we have.
That's correct. That's right.
So,
and it's a complicated equation. This is why the whole flywheel thing is so difficult.
well, but you know, nothing exists in a vacuum. Everything that you've said ties together.
That's right.
It's like a puzzle.
Right.
You know, the pieces fit together, and if they fit together correctly, then we're on the right road.
That's correct. Continuity, offense.
That's right.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Right.
So what are you going to do with yourself as time goes on here?
Well, I intend to keep teaching my econ classes at KU, and I intend to keep learning more and more about Kansas economic development and hopefully offer useful solutions.
Well, hopefully you'll see some of that offensive brain power, and
Right.
maybe we need a good football coach.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
You know, it's really been lovely to have you
It's been
come
my pleasure,
and visit
indeed.
us. And you said this too, and so I'm going to quote you
Okay.
as I thank you for being with us. Dr. Hall says, we're in constant competition with the world for talent and capital. The economic policies and programs we adopt are vital to our future. A future for talent, and a future for capital, and a future for offense. We're
That's right.
always on the offense here.
That's right.
Because we do
Thank you.
have to plan ahead.
Absolutely we do.
And if we don't,
Yes.
we're in a pickle. So it's really nice of you to have been with us today. And thank you, Dr. Hall.
Thank you
very
very
much.
much. I appreciate
and
it.
thank you, because you know, we have really interesting neighbors, and it is indeed our community. So we'll be back soon to meet some other really interesting people that live right next door to us in our community. Thank you for being with us.